Rashid and Amina appeared to be the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, his control, secrets, and lies would unravel into a chilling mystery that left an entire community stunned. Rashid was the kind of man everyone trusted. He carried himself with calm confidence, the type of presence that made people feel safe. In the community, he was known as a family man, a hard-working provider, and a person of faith. People often greeted him with admiration, believing he had built the kind of life many dreamed of. His wife, Amina, was spoken of with equal respect. She was gentle, always welcoming visitors with tea and warmth, and her kindness seemed endless. Together, they looked like the perfect pair. Their children played in the front yard while neighbors waved, often remarking on how fortunate the family seemed. The house was clean, the garden was neat, and nothing appeared out of place. But perfection, especially one that appears too carefully arranged, can often mask something deeper. Those who lived close by noticed small details that did not align with the flawless picture. Amina was rarely seen outside on her own. Whenever she went to the market or attended a gathering, Rashid was always beside her. Some thought it was simply cultural tradition, a sign of closeness, but others wondered if it was something else. There were evenings when Amina's smile looked strained, and her eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. She never voiced any complaint, but silence itself can sometimes be more telling than words. Inside their home, Amina's days followed a routine that seemed both organized and controlled. Rashid dictated how money was spent, who came to visit, and how long visits could last. Even her calls to her family grew shorter over time, explained away by busy schedules or tiredness. Her sisters worried about her, sensing she was drifting away from them, yet Rashid always had a polite explanation ready. He spoke with authority and calmness, never raising suspicion outright, but behind his polished exterior, there was a growing sense of unease. The image of Rashid at community gatherings only reinforced his reputation. He donated to charity, participated in religious events, and spoke to younger men about responsibility and discipline. Many respected his words, never imagining there could be another side to him. When people admired how devoted he seemed to Amina, they were unknowingly praising the very control he imposed. What looked like care to outsiders often left Amina with little room to breathe. The children, innocent and unaware, played in the sunlight while their parents maintained this carefully crafted picture. Yet even they noticed things in subtle ways. They saw their mother glance nervously at their father before answering questions, or hesitate before making simple decisions like what meal to cook. These small signs, unnoticed by neighbors, were clues that life inside the home was far from what it seemed. Amina's world became smaller each year, her independence fading quietly. The house that appeared welcoming from the outside often felt like a cage within. She poured her love into her children, finding comfort in their laughter, but the tension beneath the surface never fully disappeared. The moments when Rashid's smile slipped, revealing flashes of stern authority, reminded her of the reality she lived in. For those watching from a distance, nothing seemed wrong. To them, Rashid was a role model, and Amina was a fortunate wife. But the truth, carefully hidden behind walls and polite smiles, was that this family was not as perfect as it appeared. Darkness was already weaving itself into the fabric of their lives, though few could see it yet. What the community admired as stability was, in reality, control and silence disguised as harmony. And as time passed, that silence would become impossible to ignore. Rumors have a way of starting small, like faint ripples across still water, but once they begin, they rarely stop. With Rashid and Amina, those whispers grew louder with each passing month. At first, they were harmless comments exchanged between neighbors. Nothing more than curious observations. Someone mentioned that Amina no longer came to community gatherings unless Rashid was present. Another neighbor noticed she had stopped visiting the local park with her children. Soon, questions began to surface. Why was she always absent? Why did Rashid appear to speak on her behalf so often? Amina's relatives were the first to feel the distance most clearly. Her sister recalled how, not long ago, Amina would spend hours on the phone, sharing laughter, stories, and daily struggles. But now, those calls had grown brief, often cut short with an excuse of being tired. Invitations to visit were politely declined, and when she did appear at family events, she seemed distracted, her eyes darting around as if searching for approval. Rashid explained it away with a calm smile. He told them she had been exhausted from the demands of motherhood and the stress of managing the home. His voice carried such authority that few dared to challenge him. Still, unease lingered. The first truly strange incident happened late one night. A neighbor returning home saw Rashid in his backyard, digging with determination under the dim glow of a single lamp. When asked later, Rashid laughed and said he was expanding the garden beds. Most accepted the explanation, yet the image of him alone, dirt covering his hands, stuck in the mind of those who had seen it. It was odd, unsettling even, but soon brushed aside by his reputation as a respectable man. More troubling signs appeared. With money, Amina had always managed a small savings account, a quiet safety net she maintained with care. But suddenly, the balance vanished. At first, her relatives assumed she had spent it on the children or household needs, but then it emerged that Rashid had been opening multiple accounts under different names. The trail was messy, filled with transfers and withdrawals that suggested he was hiding something. When confronted casually about finances, Rashid brushed it off as investments or temporary loans, his tone firm enough to end the conversation. Despite the growing strangeness, Rashid never lost his public image. He continued to attend prayers at the mosque, speaking confidently about honesty and discipline. He offered donations, shook hands warmly, and carried himself with the same quiet pride that made people trust him. For many, it was unthinkable that a man so seemingly devout could be capable of deception. But appearances can be powerful, and Rashid knew how to maintain his. Meanwhile, Amina's presence faded even further. She stopped answering her door when neighbors came by. Children were sometimes sent outside alone, while she remained inside. On rare occasions when she was seen, her face looked pale, her smile mechanical. Those closest to her began to wonder if she was hiding something, perhaps fear. Yet Rashid's shadow loomed so strongly that few dared to ask directly. The whispers intensified after another discovery. Someone had spotted Rashid entering an apartment across town, a place none of his neighbors knew about. He visited at odd hours, never with his family. At first, it was dismissed as business, but the secrecy around it only deepened suspicions. What was Rashid hiding in that space? Why had he never mentioned it? Not even casually. By now, the whispers had turned into cautious speculation. Some said Amina was sick. Others suggested marital troubles. A few dared to wonder if Rashid's polished exterior was nothing more than a mask. Yet, with no proof and no voice from Amina herself, the questions remained unanswered. All anyone knew for certain was that something in the home was deeply wrong, and the perfect picture of a happy family was beginning to crack. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and soon they would grow into something impossible to ignore. The day Amina was reported missing marked the beginning of a nightmare that shook the entire community. At first, people assumed she had gone to visit family, or perhaps needed some time away, but as the hours turned into days, the absence grew more concerning. Her sister was the one who contacted authorities after repeated calls went unanswered. Amina's phone rang endlessly with no reply, and her social media, usually updated with small glimpses of her children, had fallen silent. Something was terribly wrong, and no amount of Rashid's calm explanations could cover the growing alarm. When investigators questioned Rashid, he claimed Amina had left voluntarily. He spoke with steady confidence, saying she had been overwhelmed and needed space. To those who did not know him closely, the explanation might have seemed reasonable, but police officers are trained to listen not just to words but to details that do not add up. Inside the house, Amina's clothes were neatly folded in the closet, her passport lay in a drawer, and her children's belongings were untouched. A woman planning to leave would not vanish without essentials. Rashid's story began to unravel almost immediately. As days passed, the investigation widened. Detectives spoke to Amina's family, who revealed the growing distance they had felt for months. They described her strained voice, her sudden silence during phone calls, and her inability to meet them without Rashid's presence. These details painted a picture of control and isolation rather than freedom. Friends told similar stories of canceled plans and excuses that sounded less convincing each time. The perfect family image Rashid had created began to crumble under scrutiny. The breakthrough came when investigators followed Rashid's movements. They discovered he had been making regular visits to an apartment across town, a place hidden from both his neighbors and extended family. With a warrant in hand, police entered the apartment and were met with a chilling sight. Inside were clothes that did not belong to him, pieces of jewelry unfamiliar to Amina's relatives, and framed photographs of a woman no one recognized. This was no business property, as Rashid had claimed. It was a secret home, one that suggested a double life. The woman in the photographs was identified after careful searching, and she had a connection to Rashid that stunned everyone. He had been in a long-term relationship with her, completely hidden from his wife and children. To the outside world, Rashid was the model husband, but behind closed doors, he had built another life altogether. The discovery shifted the investigation. If Rashid could keep such a large secret for years, what else was he capable of hiding? Authorities returned to Amina's house, searching more carefully for overlooked details. They examined Rashid's financial records, which revealed not only the suspicious bank accounts, but also significant withdrawals shortly before Amina disappeared. It looked as though he had been preparing for something, setting the stage for a life without her. The community that once trusted him began to turn. People who once greeted Rashid with admiration now whispered in fear, recalling small things they had ignored: the late-night digging, the way Amina seemed withdrawn, the unease in her eyes. Every memory was now recast under a darker light. Despite the mounting evidence, Amina herself was still missing, and the uncertainty of her fate weighed heavily on everyone. Her family clung to hope that she might still be alive, hidden somewhere. While investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, the perfect life Rashid had displayed was gone forever, replaced by suspicion, anger, and grief. What started as a simple missing person case was quickly transforming into something far more sinister. Rashid's mask of respectability was slipping, and underneath it was a man no one truly knew. The disappearance of Amina was no accident, and with each new revelation, it became clear that Rashid's carefully constructed world was about to collapse. The search of Rashid's property began quietly, with investigators combing through every inch of his home and backyard. Neighbors watched from their windows, whispering among themselves as officers moved methodically, carrying equipment and marking off areas with tape. What had once been the neat, admired house on the street was now the center of a full-scale investigation. Rashid stood outside with his arms crossed, projecting calmness, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed his unease. The first discovery came in the shed. Among ordinary gardening tools, police found bags of lime and heavy-duty plastic sheeting. Rashid explained them away as supplies for home maintenance, but the timing made the excuse unconvincing. Forensic experts knew what those items were often used for, and their suspicions only deepened. They continued their search, guided by subtle disturbances in the soil behind the shed. What seemed at first like an ordinary garden bed revealed something far more chilling when carefully unearthed. Buried beneath layers of dirt were containers, sealed and hidden with deliberate care. Inside, investigators found Amina's belongings: her phone, her wedding jewelry, and a small diary. Each item was examined with precision, photographed and bagged as evidence. The discovery of her phone was especially damning. Records showed no calls or messages after the day she vanished. It proved she had not left by choice, but it was the diary that offered the most haunting glimpse into her life. The pages told a story no one outside the household had known. Amina had written of fear, of a sense of being watched and controlled every hour of the day. She described how Rashid restricted her communication with family, monitored her finances, and reminded her constantly of his authority. She admitted she wanted to leave but felt trapped, unsure how to protect her children or where to go. Her final entries carried a tone of desperation, as if she sensed something terrible was approaching. Reading her words, investigators understood that her disappearance was no sudden decision. It was the result of years of manipulation and control. Even more evidence emerged when they turned their attention to Rashid's secret apartment. Forensic teams carefully examined every surface. At first, the rooms appeared tidy, almost staged, with clothes neatly folded and photographs displayed. But science has a way of revealing what eyes cannot see. Luminol testing uncovered faint stains on the floor, near the kitchen and bathroom. Under ultraviolet light, the marks glowed unmistakably. Samples were collected, and soon the lab confirmed what everyone feared. The blood matched Amina's DNA. The results shattered the last of Rashid's credibility. His claims of Amina leaving voluntarily could no longer stand against physical evidence that tied him directly to her disappearance. The dual life he had tried so carefully to maintain was now exposed. The respectable husband and father, the man admired for his piety and discipline, was in fact a manipulator hiding behind a mask of respectability. As news of the discoveries spread, the community reacted with disbelief. People who once greeted Rashid warmly now avoided his gaze. Friends who had defended him in the early days of Amina's disappearance felt betrayed, ashamed that they had dismissed her silence as ordinary. Her family, though devastated by the revelations, finally had answers to the questions that had tormented them for weeks. The truth was darker than they had imagined, but at least the pieces were beginning to fit together. The investigation, however, was not yet over. Detectives now had to prove not only that Rashid had deceived everyone, but also that he was responsible for Amina's fate. The items buried in his backyard, the diary filled with confessions of fear, and the bloodstains in the apartment formed a devastating pattern. Piece by piece, the perfect image of Rashid was being stripped away, replaced by a portrait of control, betrayal, and violence. What remained unanswered was the most painful question of all. What had become of Amina herself? The evidence pointed toward tragedy, but without her body, the case remained incomplete. Investigators pressed on, determined to uncover the final truth, knowing that Rashid's dark secrets were still only partially revealed. The trial of Rashid became a spectacle that drew attention far beyond the boundaries of his community. The man once admired as a model husband and devout member of society now sat in the courtroom, expressionless, as the prosecution laid out the shocking details of his double life. The evidence was overwhelming. The items buried in his backyard, the diary filled with Amina's words of fear, the financial records showing his secret dealings, and the bloodstains in the apartment that connected him directly to her disappearance. Piece by piece, the perfect image Rashid had spent years creating was dismantled before the public eye. The prosecution argued that Rashid's motive was clear. He wanted freedom to pursue a new life with the woman from the hidden apartment, freedom from the responsibilities of marriage, and freedom to control his financial affairs without interference. Yet at the same time, he craved the respect his role as husband and father brought him. Divorce, in his mind, would tarnish his reputation and threaten the carefully curated image he held in the community. The solution he chose was as chilling as it was selfish: to erase Amina from the picture entirely. In court, Amina's diary entries were read aloud, each page echoing her growing desperation. Her words painted a heartbreaking portrait of isolation, of a woman slowly losing her independence, stripped of her voice and freedom by the man who was supposed to protect her. Family members wept as her fears were laid bare, her final entries hinting that she sensed her life was in danger. These writings became a powerful piece of evidence, transforming her from a silent victim into the voice that ultimately exposed her husband's cruelty. The defense attempted to argue that the blood evidence was inconclusive, that Rashid had no reason to harm his wife, and that the items buried in the yard could have been planted, but the jury was not convinced. The sheer weight of evidence against him was undeniable. Witness testimonies about his secret apartment, financial irregularities, and controlling behavior only reinforced the image of a man living a carefully constructed lie. As the trial progressed, the community that had once respected Rashid watched in disbelief. Men who had admired his sermons about morality now turned away in shame. Women who once envied Amina for having what seemed like a devoted husband now realized the truth of her hidden suffering. The story spread quickly through news outlets and social media, shocking those who had long associated Rashid's name with respectability. The betrayal of trust cut deep, leaving many to question how well they truly knew the people around them. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom was silent. Rashid was found guilty on all major charges, including the murder of his wife. He was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. The moment the sentence was read, there was a collective release of breath, a mixture of relief and grief. Justice had been served, but it could not bring Amina back. The absence of her body left a permanent void, a reminder that some questions would remain unanswered forever. The aftermath of the case left scars that would not easily heal. Amina's children were placed under the care of her family, spared from the influence of their father's deception. They grew up carrying the weight of their mother's story, a painful lesson about the hidden dangers behind closed doors. For the community, the case was a sobering reminder that appearances can deceive, that a smile and kind words can sometimes hide the darkest intentions. Rashid's downfall became more than just a crime story. It was a lesson about control, manipulation, and the dangers of silence. It revealed how a man could hide his cruelty behind faith, respect, and tradition, using them as shields to mask his true self. Most of all, it showed the importance of listening to the quiet signs of fear, the subtle cries for help that are too often ignored. In the end, the man once seen as a symbol of respect stood exposed as a manipulator and a murderer. His dark truth, hidden for years beneath layers of lies and appearances, was finally revealed for all to see. And while justice was delivered, the story of Amina's suffering remained a haunting reminder that evil often wears the mask of normalcy until the moment it is torn away.